The Baltimore Ravens are coming off of a tough Week 13 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, but they still have a chance in the AFC North if they can get their act together here in Week 14.
Well, they're going to get their act together by facing the Pittsburgh Steelers, who they have their issues and troubles on their own. Coming up on the Raven Squash Show, we're going to talk about that, break it all down.
Rise and shine, it's the Ravens Squad, sponsored by Gametime. Everything Baltimore Ravens every week. Covering all the big hits and game-changing plays from the heart of Charm City. The way only the Locked On Podcast Network can. Flock together and squad up. The Ravens Squad Show starts now.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. I'm Kevin Oestreicher, joined with former receiver and Super Bowl champion Qadry Ismail here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, now the #1 sports podcast network. Thanks so much for being here on this Monday night and making the Locked On Ravens Squad Show a part of your day. And thank you to all the everydayers, first-time listeners, somewhere in the middle. Thank you as well. And we're here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show twice per week. And I know the Thursday night game kind of messed everything up with scheduling, but we are back here. This is effectively like a bonus edition of the squad show, because usually we have on Wednesdays as well as after the games on Sunday or whenever the games are. But because of the Thursday night game, we had to move some things around. So here Q and I are on Monday. There's a possibility Sam will join us later in the show, but if not, it'll just be Q and I rocking out with you here today. Want to tell everyone and remind everyone today's episode of Locked On Ravens Squad Show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Hugh, last time we talked, it was Thanksgiving, and it wasn't a great way to end Thanksgiving as the Ravens end up falling to the Bengals 32-14. A lot of concerning trends in that one that continued from the offense. Defensively, we saw them lay it all out in the line in that first half, but the game went on. Joe Burrow and Lamar Jackson, even though Joe just came back, they're going to figure things out, and they certainly did that. Now, we'll talk about the Ravens in the AFC North because we saw the Pittsburgh Steelers get blown out by the Bills, which made me feel a little better. I don't know about you, but obviously, with those two teams facing off in Week 14, I mean, that has to be the game of the season for both teams so far.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think the missed opportunities by the Ravens, certainly the missed opportunities by the Pittsburgh Steelers, they both are sitting there thinking that, man, we're kind of stuck in neutral, yet we're still in the conversation to obviously take the AFC North, and whoever wins are going to be in a strong position for a playoff run. So the wackiness of the AFC this year, it just blows my mind. It's fun for us, but also nerve-wracking because in the beginning of the year, you and I, as well as Sam, we was about to road trip out there, go through Kansas City, and keep on trucking straight up to Levi Stadium up in Santa Clara. Now we sitting here talking about something. Well, I don't know. What are we doing? We ain't gonna never know until the end of the season because that's what is before us with this Ravens ball club, the way they've been playing.
Yeah, there's a lot that they need to figure out and work out. Obviously, when you have a situation like the Ravens are in right now, where you are 500 through 13 weeks, you're tied still for the AFC North lead, and you have 3 games in the division left. I mean, that essentially is going to be your season. And there are a lot of different things that we can talk about, but I think right now, Q, the word that I would just use is concerning. And there are a lot of different reasons for that. I think obviously it starts on offense right now with just the lack of production there. Obviously, 5 turnovers against that Bengals defense is unacceptable, and we know that. And John Harbaugh took accountability for that. And I'm like, wait, this is out of all the things you can take accountability for, okay, cool, it's great you're taking accountability, but I was more so kind of imagining it being, well, it's a game plan thing he's taking accountability for, or something else along those lines. So with the offense, I mean, Lamar Jackson is where we'll probably start there because clearly he hasn't played up to his standard over the last 3 weeks. And I think, again, there are a lot of different reasons for that, whether it be, his health situation or the offensive line is obviously a big part of that conversation as well. And you and I have talked about that, and Sam as well, where it's like the biggest concern point for the offense over the course of the season. You said this, the most consistent thing has been that offensive line. That has been the year-long problem for them. But, you factor that in with, doesn't really feel like Lamar trusts those guys up front. And, the injury situation, how healthy or not healthy he is still at the forefront of everybody's minds as well. So out there on Thursday night, like, how did he look health-wise to you? Because I felt like the Jets game, we saw some, like, I guess soreness isn't the right word, just kind of he was getting up slowly and kind of felt like he was laboring a little bit. Didn't seem like that as much. I mean, we saw some vintage Lamar plays out there. There were some other ones where he, maybe couldn't get around the edge or whatnot. But how did he look out there to you health-wise? Did he look like he was slowing down at all? Or was it encouraging, not with the play that he had, but that to you, maybe he did look healthy?
In all the years of obviously watching Lamar play and do his thing, um, I have never seen where a D lineman could keep up with him. He was always breaking the angle of pursuit. When you look at the Jets game, you didn't see him break the angle of pursuit. You saw the Jets play a conservative coverage that usually Lamar, because of his legs, can take advantage of, and it forces the opponent to alter the way they play defense, which then turns it back advantageous to him and his receiving core. When you look at this past week's game against the Bengals, to play zero coverage against Lamar Jackson and be successful with it, that is where it gets to be a head scratcher and say that no, he is not all there as far as his skill set of the Superman, get out of the pocket, make you just look foolish 30 yards later. I'm trying to remember what number he was. Maybe it was 99, I believe. But regardless, the D lineman for the Cincinnati Bengals, I mean, dude had ran stride for stride with Lamar parallel to the line of scrimmage, and Lamar never was able to break that angle of pursuit. And that was really shocking to me. And that's what I felt like, no, he's not altogether there when you're talking about, the greatness of Lamar Jackson and breaking the angle of pursuit.
Yeah. And there are a lot of different things because early in the season, we saw Lamar be able to carve up defenses. And I think, over the course of his career, a lot of that has been like, yes, the arm talent is clearly there. He's able to sit back in the pocket and slice and dice you up. But obviously, there are so many other elements to his game. And one of those is the fact that, you have to respect both his arm and his legs. And right now, it doesn't feel like teams are respecting his legs nearly as much as we've seen in years past. And there was one play, I can't remember when it was, but it was essentially an option play. And it was Rasheen Ali in the backfield, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, but everybody went to Ali. No
Yes.
one really was worried about Lamar breaking it to the outside. And so, you see
That's sacrilegious.
Yeah, you see the edge guy kind of breaking down into the middle to get to the hole, and you see, the other guys motioning. You rarely see that when Lamar is, like we've rarely seen that, where you always see guys going with Lamar. So like, okay, someone else can beat us, but not Lamar. We didn't see that on that play in particular, but it just feels like teams are respecting that less because they don't feel like it is a threat. And I think that even if Lamar isn't able to do as many things as he has been right now because of whatever health stuff he's going through, I think it's up to Todd Monken and John Harbaugh and whoever to find ways to still make that a reasonable threat within this offense, because it eliminates part of how dangerous they can be. And especially when your line is particularly blocking well and, you're already dealing with inconsistencies there. If defenses are just going to stack that box and not have any regard for what Lamar can do with his legs, that just makes things a million times more difficult.
Yeah, it does. And the genius of this offense and what Todd Monken likes to do, can do, and has shown to be successful with is the fact that Rasheen Ali take him out, put in a Derrick Henry, and you run that same play with a healthy Lamar Jackson. I mean, good God, man, the DN, the safety, the nickel corner, all those guys are like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? Like, there's too much talent out here. We're confused. You don't have that when you're talking about just guys just crashing down on Rasheen Ali. And it was interesting that everyone was caught up in the snap count of him having more snaps than Derrick Henry. But then when John said in his presser, and I actually mentioned it on our show as well, situational football, like, you didn't possess the ball an awful lot to begin with, number one. And number two, when you did possess it, you're trying to get down the football field as quickly as possible to put points on the board. So you're in an offense that's a hurry up style offense. And to be honest with you, it's clear, and it's been clear since last year, Derrick Henry is not the focal point in the 2-minute offense. Justice Hill is. Well, Justice wasn't up because of whatever injury he was dealing with. So therefore, you got Rasheen Ali in a scenario where he's going to play some snaps that technically would have been Justice Hill, but technically, because of the way that the offense was going in general, situational football, like, it didn't really matter. You weren't executing, and therefore your stud, your big boy in Derrick Henry, the way the offense, if it was functioning, would have had him in there. It didn't have him in there, and that is a major concern. The lack of consistency, offensive line, the lack of consistency, inaccurate passes when your guys are wide open, the lack of consistency, the turnovers at the wrong time from a slew of guys, the lack of consistency, drop passes going even as far back as the Dolphins game, the Vikings game. You have these consistently inconsistent moments that is causing this offense not to play up to its potential.
And one of the things, because you're right, like, it's been clear over the last, I mean, since Derrick's been in Baltimore, that, they're going to favor more of a quote unquote pass protection third down back over Derrick Henry. And, it's another conversation whether they should or not. But one of the things that I remember you and I did talk about, we had a show during the offseason, during training camp, and you were out there during training camp, and you saw a lot of Keaton and what he was able to do before, he had the whole injury situation in training camp. But something that Willie Taggart talked about, I remember us specifically doing a show on this, was that he had a lot of praise for Keaton in the pass protection game, where his exact quote was on Keaton in pass protection, said he's much, much better. He wouldn't actually do it a lot in college, and now you have a better understanding of how to do it. Now he's doing it with great technique and with confidence, and that's more than anything. When you're blocking in the NFL, you have to have confidence, and he's able to do that now, and he can have confidence because he knows what to do. He knows the play. He's not thinking a lot. He can go out and just play, and that's development. He's developed to be a better pass blocker as well. And so to me, I'm like, even if it's not Henry in those situations, I would love to at least just give Keaton a shot there, because with Justice, he's your veteran guy there. Like, he's the guy you trust in pass protection. Like, I get it. He's essentially in that spot because he's done it for a lot of years with the Ravens and he's gotten there. But, Ali and Mitchell, I just think that Mitchell gives you more. And if he's as good as they are saying, and he's improved in that pass protection area, and look, I'm not saying Ali didn't do a good job in pass protection, but even still, Mitchell only having 8 snaps to Ali's, 29, I believe it was. Even if it's not going to be Henry in those situations, which, look, clearly it's not going to, and those are other conversations. I would love to see him maybe split that role between Ali and Mitchell. And so you're not phasing Ali out of the game plan because they clearly trust him there. But, if they trust Mitchell the way that Taggart kind of talked about it there, in terms of like, yeah, he's gotten better in that situation. I think that he can help you out there if he's gotten better, and also give you all those elements that maybe Ali just can't give you because of the speed and burst and electrifyingness that Mitchell brings to the table.
So here's where I think the toughest part of being an analyst, being a influencer slash podcaster slash TV personality slash insider, all those slashes. You ain't there in every single practice. Once training camp is over with, they limit what you can see.
Yeah.
We don't know the
Right.
game planning. We don't know how the guys are truly reacting and acting to give the coordinator confidence or your fellow teammates confidence in the situations that you would be in the game or another guy would be taking your place. We just don't have that access. So it's tough for me to just clearly say that, yeah, Keaton Mitchell, he's going to be that third down back. He's, this amazing guy that, we've seen him thud up against, Joe linebacker for whomever, pick a team. Now, game day, yeah, it's evident we can see certain things, but when you also see game day certain things and those certain things during game day is like, nah, uh, you can't catch. You can't pass protect. Remember Justice Hill? That was clear and evident. We were like, ooh,
Yeah.
you couldn't pass protect. And Chris Jones and company in the playoffs got the better of you. Therefore, you were part of the reason why the Ravens offensively lost the game. You come back next year, homeboy was balling out, putting dudes on their butts. And you could clearly see his pass protection game was way superior. He worked on it. So if Taggart is saying that Keaton worked on it, awesome. But until he's in there in the 2 minute and he got confidence, meaning Todd Monken got confidence in him, then okay, go ahead. Give us a good quote. Right now, we're in the middle of the season where we don't want quotes. We want action. We want to see it. If we can see it, go out there and do it.
Yeah, I mean, look, I of course we don't know what's going on in the facility, who's performing well in practice, who's not, who's earning those opportunities. I was just, of course, going off what Taggart had to say back in August, and we're in December now. August is a long ways from December in terms of that. Keaton obviously went through his injury, but I just think that, in those situations with game flow, even just like not having a guy in there to pass protect, just running and running back out in the flat and having that happen to make sure you can maybe pick up some yards. There are certain situations to call for a guy like Justice and Ali to be in the game on third downs. Like that it's a fact. You're not going to just limit those guys and have them at 0 snaps, but I'm curious to see what the game flow is next week, because look, we know that Pittsburgh Steelers team just got gashed on the ground by the Buffalo Bills. So I'm at least expecting Derrick Henry and some of these other guys to get some more run on the ground. And coming up, we'll talk about that a little bit more of what should Baltimore do and what should they take away from the disappointing offensive performances and the disappointing game in Week 13 to take into the rest of their season, including that big Week 14 matchup. So be sure to stay tuned. We have a lot coming your way here on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being where I can get you paid, don't miss any of the excitement of the sports season, whether you're following the NFL, NBA, or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. If you haven't tried it yet, PrizePicks is the simplest way to play. Just pick more or less on at least 2 player stats, and if you get them right, you win. It takes less than 60 seconds to make your lineup. You can play anywhere PrizePicks operates, including California, Texas, and Georgia. And I've been using PrizePicks during both football Sundays and NBA tip-offs. It keeps every game exciting. I like picking my favorite players like Lamar Jackson, Nikola Jokic to see how my predictions play out. The new stacks feature is a game changer. You can now pick more on Steph Curry's points, threes, and assists in the same lineup. Plus, if one of your players leaves early with an injury, the injury reboot saves my lineup from a loss. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Moving along on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show, Kevin Oestreicher and Kadri Ismail still breaking things down here with you. A new week. I think we can, put Thanksgiving behind us. Hopefully, Ravens have some lessons to learn from it, but they'll have to do it quickly because they have the Pittsburgh Steelers coming to town, a team that is also not feeling too good about themselves after what we saw in Week 13 for them against the Bills. So all of Baltimore says a little thank you to the Bills and thank you to Josh Allen for helping them out here. Hugh, in terms of what the Ravens should do heading into this week, John Harbaugh kind of talked about their preparation during the days that they had off, this mini bye, and how they kind of got some work in. For you, heading into a game against a rival, a team like the Steelers, or obviously, AFC Central days, like we know this team, like there's history with rivalries, right? What is the difference? And I know I ask you this every single season, but we're like in December, and this is the first Pittsburgh game we've had all year. I mean, what is it like preparing for a rival versus preparing for any other given Sunday? Because it is one game at a time. They're just an opponent. What did Juju say? Nameless, faceless opponents or something like that when it came to the team. You have to look at it that way. But also, like, the energy kind of shifts in that building, especially now with the Steelers and how that rivalry has evolved. We've heard many people talk about it. You've talked about it on this show. It is do or die time for this team, and doing it in a very emotionally charged week whenever you play the Steelers.
Yeah, and the stakes have gotten even higher now because of what we saw with the Thursday night debacle of tryptophan overload. And then, of course, obviously the Bills doing what the Bills needed to do to help us and smack it down on Pittsburgh. So now their fan base is in an uproar. And of course, their coach is in the hot seat as far as their fan base feeling like he needs to move on. Our fan base is saying that John Harbaugh needs to move on. I mean, there's so much tension there that it's palpable. I think the big thing is this. From a player perspective, you can't make it too big. You can't do it to the point where you just play either a frozen level of football. And what I mean by frozen, you just choke and freeze and just don't execute. You also can't necessarily make it so big that you get so amped up that you drain yourself and you start making mistakes. And then third and finally, you definitely don't want to hype it up to the point where you go out there thinking that it's all everything. And then by the time the fourth quarter runs around, your energy is so doggone low and next to nothing that they wind up getting the better of you. So there is a lot of pacing that goes on for this week. Don't get too high, don't get too low. Put yourself in a good position to make sure you're understanding what you do best, and then also understanding what they are going to do, what Jalen Ramsey is going to do, what we're going to see from Joey Porter Jr. What if Patrick Queen is up? What is Cam Hayward or TJ Watt? What are some of the stunts they're going to do? Is Highsmith going to be up? If he's up, oh boy. Because Highsmith and TJ Watt are a formidable opponent. But all of that, it's how you see the game, that they're struggling from a receiver standpoint. Their number 14, who's a part of their backfield, he gets a lot of balls out of the backfield. They like to get him a lot. I know they also got big boy number 80. Their stud tight end. So you're going to have to figure out the business decision to make. Am I going to go ahead and tackle you? Or am I going to go ahead and try another way to get you to the ground? So they got their playbook and their plan. The main thing is you got to get to Aaron Rodgers. Do we have the guys to do it? We thought we had the guys to do it, and then comes Joe Burrow. Yeah, even though you might have, quote unquote, had max protection to help Joe kind of, be safe in the pocket, man, there were times where you should have had him and you didn't have him. So it's one of those situations where, yeah, man, come on, let's go. Let's do this. Let's be focused. Let's understand, seize the moment. Don't get too high during the week. But when it comes time for game planning, lock in mentally. So then when the game comes, you know what to do, offense, defense, and special teams, and take advantage of it.
Speaking of kind of game planning out here, there was a question from Gerald a little earlier, Q, and he asked you, he said, does Q think they should let Tez Walker open the top of a defense and to put speed on the field on some plays like Flowers, Keaton, Tez to give their opponents hell in coverage? And, I think it's interesting because we saw that one deep ball that Lamar threw to Tez, obviously couldn't come down with it in that Cincy game, but I think it adds an extra element. We know Tez can get open and shake free on some of those plays. And sometimes like Eric DaCosta, we've talked about it, building the track team, right? Making sure you got guys that can fly out there on the field, and against the Steelers defense that does have some older players out there and guys that are, they're not like Nate Wiggins fast in terms of corner speed. You can maybe get by on a Jalen Ramsey if you just run a straight go route and you're able to just beat him with your speed. Do you think that's beneficial to the Ravens to kind of look at that part of their playbook a little more?
Absolutely. They actually did have some of those elements as far as the personnel package in the game and what you're talking about. The biggest thing that I would say is the protection. So anytime you have a deep route, you're going to have to protect a little bit longer. And again, Joe Burrow, for example, had some deep balls that, well, I know that they connected up a few times as far as he and his number one guy, Jamar, but forget what's the other kid's name? He had an off game.
For the Tinsley?
Tinsley, thank you. Yeah, Tinsley had an off game. My point in saying that is this: with Tez and or Keaton and or putting that kind of speed package in the game to go vertical, you got to have protection. There was some really strong protection for what Joe Burrow did. There wasn't as strong protection for what Lamar is trying to do. If you figure out whether it be keeping in, Pat Ricard and now you got an extra guy and you know what, you're going to sneak Keaton out on a route, but yet you got an opportunity to go deep with a Tez, then okay. We saw a little bit of that in the Jets game, and Lamar underthrew a little bit of Tez, but we also saw it, in the game that literally from a bigger picture standpoint, like the Bengals, there were two opportunities that Tez just didn't come down with, and that's the tough part. When your number is called, you got to make the play. That's how I look at it. There are plays that needed to have been made that were not made with those personnel guys in the game.
Yeah, and I think that's the unfortunate part where the Bengals offensive line, for as much of a concern point as it's been in recent seasons, they've actually held up pretty well over the course of this year. There you have guys playing well, and obviously it's on the opposite side of things for the Ravens, where I just think that there's only so much you can do with such poor protection. And they obviously tried out a little bit with Emry Jones, and we'll talk about that a little bit coming up in the next part of the show. But, especially when you could feel over the course of the game, Q, at least to me, Joe was trying to feel things out early, coming back off of that injury and trying to see, all right, what can I do? What can I do? Let's try to get back into the rhythm of things here. And so there were some throws he missed on, some throws that were behind guys. And, obviously you talked about Tinsley, certainly didn't help. We stop his route and
wide open.
His position coach was probably like, what? But that's the difference between having a T. Higgins out there versus having an inexperienced player. And Higgins could be back in a couple weeks from his concussion. I don't know what his recovery process looks like from that, but even still with that, you saw, I think, to me, Q, over the course of the game, Joe continued to just start to look more and more comfortable in there, feeling things out. And then eventually, again, like it's Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, they'll figure things out. With Lamar and his offensive line, just feels like I mentioned earlier, there's just no trust there. And so things that you start to learn how to do when you're a young player, you start to get more confident in doing that. All of a sudden, you don't get protection or the protection you need, and you're getting guys in your face every 1.5, 2 seconds, and all that stuff you start to second guess. And you start to be like, well, can I actually get away with doing this or doing that? So, I mean, there are a lot of different things with Lamar's protection about why it's not working. We talked about that a little earlier, but I just think that we saw in real time the night and day difference between a quarterback trusting their line and a quarterback not trusting their line, in my opinion.
So it's weird because I just think that it seems like when teams play against the Ravens, they miraculously play better. It is befuddling to me when I see the way the Bills offensive line get it week one. Hey, they're fresher than fresh compared to later in the season. But we just couldn't get to Josh Allen. You look at, the Lions offensive line and getting to, Josh. When you look at the Texans offensive line and you're getting to their backup quarterback before CJ Stroud comes back. Actually, CJ Stroud played so well, they gave him Offensive Player of the Week. So what the heck is going on with that? Then you look at against the Jets. Yeah, you kind of got to the Jets a little bit more. That was good. You look at the Browns. Okay, you kind of got to the Browns as well. But my point is that it just seems as though the flip side of it. Why can't this Ravens offensive line, like for once, just be that stud offensive line? When are we going to see? I don't think we are going to see it. To be honest with you, I mean it's too late in the year, and it's what it is. But I wish just for one moment I would be wrong and be wrong this coming week. Then of course be wrong the next week and wrong the next week after that. Next year, oh my God, oh they're going on a run. But I digress. The offensive line right now, Emry Jones looked a little bit better, but right, whoa, I'm not vibing with this offensive line.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people are, and for a good reason. Because again, it's not just a Voorhees problem, not just a Falele problem, not just it's everybody here who is either, some guys will have poor games, other guys will have great games, and it'll flip the next week. And there's been no consistency with that group all season. So coming up in the third part of the show, we're going to talk a little bit more about Emry Jones. We'll also talk about if some of these issues, particularly with the O-line, are even fixable at this point in the season. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way here on this edition of the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. First, this show is brought to you by Gametime. And with Gametime, there are so many things that they have to offer, and the World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. With 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive, but let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. Puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. Now, you pull up the app and the layout makes it so simple to scroll through matchups and compare seat views. You pick a game, tap the section, and have your tickets locked in within minutes. No confusion, no hunting for the fine print. In the seat view feature, it is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Gametime. All right, moving along. It is the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Kevin Oestreicher and Kadri Ismail still here with you, rocking out on this Monday. I get like a bonus episode or a makeup episode, however you want to frame it here. We're usually on Wednesdays and after games, but of course, with the way the Thursday night game happened, we had to move some things around. So here we are on this Monday night. Appreciate everybody for being here. The Squad Show, again, yes, twice per week, but we also have the regular Locked On Ravens show, which is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. Again, it's the reaction shows, watch-alongs during games, and bonus episodes. We have all the daily Ravens content and coverage that you need. And we actually, we did manage to get Sam Njoku on here. He has graced us with his presence here. I think only a segment, right, Sam? We're only doing a segment.
Just a second, but
okay. Well, hey, something is better than nothing.
Yes.
So, how are you feeling, Sam? How are you doing? And have you recovered at all since that Thanksgiving night loss to the Bengals for the Ravens?
I recovered on Monday. If you saw me on Thursday, I was exhausted. It was almost 2:00 in the morning. I just had my fill of my third helping of turkey, and then this game happened. So I was out of it. I know, Q, you were heading over. You had a lot of work to do. So I know you were just as tired as I was, but I just got over it. I'm finally over. I saw the film. I'm not as, up against the wall as I was before, before watching the film. But, the Ravens are who the Ravens are. And hopefully, because the AFC is so terrible and the division in general is terrible, the Ravens still have a shot here.
Yeah, well, we talked, Q and I did, Sam, about Emry Jones a little bit and that O-line heading into the third part of the show here. And so I just want to kind of focus on Emry a little bit because, Ronnie Stanley said that he showed that, Emry Jones showed he could play in this league. And Emry thought, his debut outside of the holding call, obviously, which again, he's a rookie getting his first snaps. But he also said that, there wasn't anything where he was like told, oh, you're going to play this week. He's been preparing for the opportunity. And I'm sure that's what it's going to continue to be. I'm not really sure what they go back to this week against the Steelers. Is it going to be a rotation? Is it not? I know John Harbaugh had some comments about, there's a difference between being a starter and an established starter or whatnot. But after having a couple of days to kind of look at things, I thought that personally, Emry Jones was fine. He wasn't great, wasn't the best lineman on the field. He also wasn't bad either, which I think having a steady medium might honestly just be what this team needs, because there are so many low lows with this group. Outside of the holding call, sure, there were some moments where Jones struggled, in my opinion, but it wasn't anything that was super loud on the field. So for you, Sam, what was your overall assessment of Emry Jones now that we've kind of had a couple of days to digest it?
He looked like a rookie. I think that I see the potential there. Obviously, not much of a sample size. He looked like he was a rookie, and maybe that's enough for the Ravens right now. But you want some stability at the offensive line, and you and I talked about this, Kevin, about the difference between being a rotation guy and just plugging a guy in and letting him play for 70-plus snaps. And that's what the Ravens really need out of him. If they're going to put him in, just go ahead and put him in, make mistakes. I know he's not going to have the type of statue you saw from Ben Grubbs and Marshall Yonda his first go-around, but, just get him in there. This is a Steelers defense coming up that can get after you, but after that, you have a couple of games where, maybe Micah Parsons could be an issue. Trey Hendrickson, we're not really sure if he's going to be able to play next week. So there are opportunities for him to get his feet wet, but I think they just need to get some stable, consistent play out of the offensive line. If Emry Jones, that guy, go ahead, plug him in, let him play. But I'm not sure if he's going to be solving all of your problems on the offensive line. Of course, if he plays better in his ceiling, well, if his floor isn't as low as Angie Voorhees and Daniel Falele, looking like it's going to be Voorhees that gets the boot. But regardless, wherever he comes in, if you can get some better plays consistently out of that guard spot, then you're in good hands.
It's weird because you look at the rotation and that kind of puts peer pressure on you as a player to not be the one they're looking at to replace. So you hope that that will be a fire lit underneath Voorhees and or Fa'alele to not be roly-poly-oly and the void of death. Both of them dudes, use the time to be like, all right, Emry Jones, oh boy, we feel like this is Raiders of the Lost Ark and he's trying to raid our tomb because we ain't trying to sit on the bench. But let's hope that somehow, some way, they will put themselves in position to play better because of Emry Jones sitting there breathing down their neck.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, because with the way that we've seen this offensive line perform, like we've talked about, there are so many low lows. But one of the things that I thought was really interesting that actually Ronnie Stanley said after the game, I mentioned he said his thoughts about Emry Jones, but one of the things that he also said was he was asked if there are instances where players can actually suggest ideas for offensive plays. And Stanley said yes. He said, quote, that's definitely a part of it, is the collaboration part, wanting to get back to the run specifically, which Q, you and I talked about in the first part of the show. But he said that's something we want to encourage the coaches to do when we come back to the sideline. And said that's something we encourage the coaches to do when we come back to the sideline, but we're still going to go out there and run whatever play is called. So when you were playing, Q, was there any of that where you go back to the sideline and, talk with the coaches like, hey, we feel like we should be doing this more. And then, if they call it, great. If not, okay, we're still going to go out there and do it? Or is that something, because we know the Ravens, especially when Todd Monken came in, there's been a lot of collaboration effort between the players and the coaches. But I thought it was interesting, Stanley's comments about, specifically mentioning, this was after a question about the run game, obviously, but talking about wanting to get back to the run, something they encourage the coaches to do. I was wondering if that was something that was a common thing during your playing days, or if that's something that's not really heard of.
No, that's kind of been standard operating procedure since football began, as far as I can remember. The good teams, they collaborate all the time. And hey, what did you see out there? There's different levels to what did you see. There is the coach up in the booth that kind of sees the all 22 and has an idea, okay, they're playing cover 2 or they're playing a cover 4 shell look. Great. Ooh, wow, you could see, wow, that guy is playing a yard inside, and that's not typical what we've seen on film. But then you also go look for the field perspective. It's like, man, that dude, he's kind of like, his eyes don't look right, and he's looking in the backfield an awful lot, and he's not really reading me as much. I think I could beat him on a double move. Even though this is that cover 4, I think I could beat him on a double move. And so you go to the sideline, you articulate that to the coaches, and then it's up to them to put it into play. I've had that done so many times. Variety of teams. Like, that's just the way the good coaches / good quarterbacks / good receivers do. They talk to one another to the point where you get so familiar with what's going on in the game moment that when that adjustment is called, it winds up working. So yeah, hopefully Ronnie feels like, hey man, we need to do more whatever power, or we need to do more runs to my side, but a wide zone as opposed to inside zone, as opposed to a duo block scheme, whatever that might be. Let them communicate it. Let them talk about it, and let hopefully Todd Monken and the rest of the offensive staff try to figure out and implement some of the actions from their players' vantage point.
Yeah, and I haven't played football professionally, but I mean, it will just be in the best interest of the Ravens to get as much input as you can. And of course, you're not going to get better input than the players that are actually on the football field. So, yeah, I hope Todd Monken is taking interest in what Ronnie Stanley and others have to say in terms of what they need to do. If they were telling him to run the football, it certainly wasn't coming into his ears. It wasn't registering because they did not run the football effectively. Well, I won't say effectively, very many times. And I know a lot of Ravens fans are upset about that. There are things that caused that, but neither here nor there. I think the point is that the Ravens players and the coaching staff need to be healthy enough in their relationship where they can come to each other with gripes and concerns, as well as input in what they can do on the football field. So hopefully the offensive line is saying, hey, let's run the ball down the Steelers' throats. Let's run the ball down the Bengals' throats when we go back to Cincinnati next week and really establish who we are as an offense. Because again, there are no powerhouse teams in the AFC this year, maybe not even in the National Football League. And it's the teams that do best what they're good at, the teams that have that identity and are the best at it, they're going to go far in this postseason. And I think the Ravens can establish the run and get back to what they're good at, and that is running the football very well. It's going to take a whole lot of pressure out of the shoulders of Lamar Jackson, who has regressed a little bit in terms of production this year. And maybe that could escalate this offense and this team to new heights.
Yeah, again, a lot of different reasons for everything that's going on with this offense. One of them, I think, is the regression of Roger Rosengarten. And John brings that up, saying Rosengarten has regressed this year too. What's that about? It's crazy, guys. Rosengarten's getting beat with speed. He's getting thrown on the ground by guys. Like, it just, that to me has been the most surprise. Because, again, with Falele and Voorhees, it's like, we knew this was always a possibility. Like, there was a very wide range of outcomes for Falele and Voorhees this season, especially with what we saw from Falele last year and whatnot. But with what we saw from Rosengarten last year, I thought he was on the fast track to becoming one of the franchise tackles on this team, and maybe being a replacement on that line for when Ronnie Stanley leaves, or if they want to move him over to the left side, or just being the most consistent tackle on the team. And it's just been a rough year for Rosengarten. So, Sammy, what have you seen from him? Because I've been very shocked with the level of play from him this year, because it hasn't been good.
Yeah, it hasn't. And I think last year I was cautious with the praise I was giving him, because a lot of times when the Ravens had him one-on-one with the premier pass rusher, they'd chip him with Pat Ricard or chip him with Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews and help him out pretty much a lot of the times. This past year, they've done that a little bit, but because of the way the offense is flowing, they can't really have, guys out there blocking for him too many times, especially if they want to get the ball down the field, something you guys talked about earlier in the show. So he's regressed, but the whole offensive line has regressed. Remember, this for the most part is the same offensive line that we saw last year, and Stanley's not having the best year. Tyler Linderbaum has regressed a little bit. We know what's been going on with Voorhees and Falele as well, and Rosengarten as well. So, this is on George Warhop, and I don't really like to criticize coaches, especially positional coaches. But when the writing is on the wall, when your whole unit is struggling the way that it has this year, then he's a guy that's under fire. If this offensive line doesn't get their act together towards the end of the season, he could be a guy that you're talking about that may be looking for work in 2026.
Why I don't know why I am protective of George Warhop, and I've not seen him like once and had some great interaction with him. I do know and respect the fact that in this game and the way in which it is played, there's so much up and down that happens, and you got to roll with it. I think for him to come in last year, do what he did, and to get them to perform the way they performed, you're talking about an all time with your running back doing the way he did because of your offensive line. But then you come back this year, and because of the offensive line, have a regression. Man, I'm just. That's where I'm like, boy, is it the guys? Is it because my techniques, my coaching style, nothing has changed. I'm telling y'all what y'all need to do, the whole 9 yards, but I'm out there. I'm not the one out there getting whooped because you're bumbling into each other on a stunt that is the most basic of stunts. Like that to me is where I'm like, man, I'm a little bit protective of him, but I totally get your point. Pro football, everyone gets held under the microscope when you're not performing well.
Yeah, that's the reality of the situation. So this offensive line needs to shape up and do it fast. This offense needs to shape up and do it fast because things aren't slowing down here, and the Ravens have a lot of quality opponents they're going to have to face over these last 5 weeks of the season. Sam, thanks for popping on, man. Always good to see you, even if it's just for a segment. At least we got you on for something.
Squad show.
Well, we'll be back on Wednesday. Sam will be back in a driver's seat, and all will be well in the world because of that. So we're going to head into our final break. Q and I will be back in the final part of the show talking about if these Ravens issues are even fixable this season or if they're just going to have to ride them out and see how far it takes them. So stay tuned. We got plenty coming your way here on this edition of the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. All right, moving along here. It is the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Kevin Oestreicher and Kadri Ismail. No more Sam and Njoku. But again, thanks to Sam for popping on and giving us some time. Look, the offensive line has been a topic the entire season. We talked about that. We know that. But when looking at the Ravens and kind of how they can fix things moving forward and what can they patch up before the playoffs start, how can they get on a roll, some of these issues to me just don't seem fixable. Like some do. Like I think defensively, I think that this team can be better at tackling. I think they are capable of being better, like a better tackling defense. We haven't seen that as much over the recent weeks, but I think they're capable of fixing that. I think from a pass rush perspective, we've seen some of the flashes. Now, last week was not good at all. You had your secondary be your best pass rushers, and you had all your pass rushers be your worst guys there. So that's a concern point, but I think that those are fixable issues. The offensive line, I just don't know if it's fixable at this point in the season because I don't think you have the personnel to do so. And one of the things that Tanya wrote here, which I think is a good point, is look, they could have had a guy like Dalton Reisner, and he was injured last year. EDC could have gotten him, but the Bengals ended up making that move. And the O-line is better in Cincinnati than it is in Baltimore right now. They address those issues. Obviously, we talked a lot about guys like Kevin Zeitler potentially, although every team needs offensive linemen at the deadline, so that was kind of hard. But with what we've seen, and you've talked about this too, like just when it's us talking on Lock the Ravens about how I don't think Garrett DeCosta did enough at the guard position. I know, you've talked about that as well. But the O-line is just like, I feel like they're going to have to ride it out here. I don't really know because with Emry Jones, while he was fine, he still is a rookie and is probably going to go through some ups and downs like we saw from a Malachi Starks and a Mike Green before those guys really got going, because experience is one of the best things that you can get. And you're just, you're going to get that by what? Trial through fire. It's just, you're going to have to go through it that way. So that's the most concerning thing to me is like, unless they can magically flip a switch where all these guys suddenly start playing really well, I don't know if that switch is there.
Yeah, there's no magical switch in the NFL. It's you either do or you don't. And, guys that have their struggles, but then they switch it over into, okay, I can do this. And then they pull it out. It comes from a level of practice, commitment, focus, and all the other things that are off the field to help you do your turnaround. But there's nobody coming through that door. Ben Cleveland and company that are in-house, they're clearly not good enough to compete. Note Boom is not good enough to compete. Those guys just are guys that are, in case of an emergency, you would have to plug them in. Emory Jones is getting a look, and we'll see how that consistency continues or if he has some kind of issue. Bigger picture wise, when you're looking at this Ravens offensive line, you're right. It is something to be concerned with, and man, I mean, I think this will be the team's undoing. To be perfectly honest, you're going to look back on this year and say, "Wow, we had an opportunity, we blew it because we didn't have the offensive line that we needed." They're also going to say, "Wow, we blew it. We didn't play up to the level that we were capable of playing as a defensive front and get pressure on those upper tier quarterbacks. We got pressure on the, medium to lower tier quarterbacks, but the upper tier ones, we failed to get pressure on them, and that's what cost us this season."
I want to read you off a stat, and this actually comes from Marcus Mosher, who's the host of Locked On Cowboys here on the network, and I've read this out on multiple different shows that I've done over the course of the last couple of days. But Marcus illustrated kind of what you were talking about. He said the Ravens have given up 31.7 points per game against the following quarterbacks: Josh Allen, Jared Goff, Patrick Mahomes, CJ Stroud, Matthew Stafford, Caleb Williams, and Joe Burrow. 13.6 points per game the Ravens defense has given up against Tua Tagovailoa, Joe Flacco, the Cleveland version of Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, J.J. McCarthy, and Tyrod Taylor. So against those upper echelon quarterbacks, the Ravens have very much struggled. And, I get that, they played Josh and Goff and Mahomes and all those guys before they had their defensive turnaround. But at the same time, after their defensive turnaround, and I guess did that start with Stafford? I guess so in that Rams game. But, you've played a lot of those lower tier quarterbacks over the last handful of weeks, and your quarterback schedule coming up, Aaron Rodgers / Mason Rudolph doesn't necessarily concern me all that much. I mean, that Pittsburgh situation is just dire right now, but you're going to have to play Joe Burrow again. You're going to have to play Jordan Love, and you're going to have to play Drake May. So those are three really good quarterbacks, guys that are playing on, like, obviously Love and May are playing on very successful teams right now, and Bengals are trying to fight their way back into the AFC North lead. You're going to have to show that you can play, because either Q, if they do make the postseason, which I've talked about and we've talked about, is probably going to be through the division, if anything, because they've lost almost every other tiebreaker there is against the AFC playoff opponents. You're either going to be playing an elite quarterback or an elite defense. Sometimes both, but at least an elite quarterback or an elite defense, where obviously if Mahomes gets there, which is up in the air right now, Mahomes or maybe Allen or Burrow if he gets there, who knows? But you also maybe have to face the Texans defense or the Broncos defense. And so it's one or the other with a lot of these playoff teams. While the AFC is so out of sorts this year, I'm very interested to see how this defense looks in the last 5 weeks of the season, because, J.J. McCarthy's not walking through that door to play your defense again, or, Dylan Gabriel or whatnot. Like, you're going to have to play some of these guys. And even with a Rodgers, at least he's experienced. I mean, you can say the same thing about Tyrod. I think Aaron's a better quarterback than Tyrod is, and who knows if it's Mason Rudolph for him or not. But even still, you throw everything out the window with those Steelers games anyway. So who knows who's going to win those games at the end of the day?
Yeah. Quarterback play, upper tier quarterback play, if you're not getting after them and making life uncomfortable, bruh, they will make you look silly. And those names you called, yes, they made this Ravens D-line and defense look silly. So, yeah, moving forward, Drake May is on some Drake May type stuff and looking good. Moving forward, we know that it just takes one or two things, and next thing you know, Aaron Rodgers is like, oh, Jordan Love, he's clearly trying to keep pace with uh, the division race that is the Chicago Bears. So, he's going to be on point, and it is up in Green Bay too, frozen tundra, and my God, man, the Florida-blooded guys are going to be like, oh my God, it's so cold. So, yeah, there is just so much that is right before you as a team, and it's so right there, as in what to do. You got to go out there and execute and do it. If you don't, it's a season lost. It really truly is.
Yeah, and to me, look, the season is not over for the Ravens right now. Again, this Pittsburgh game essentially is your season, in my opinion. You just get really dicey if you lose this game, and then you have to worry about division tiebreaker with the Steelers, even if you win that Week 18 game, and Pittsburgh gets that really important. So this game is going to determine a lot. And if they are able to win it, again, you can still work through your issues, but how many of those issues are fixable versus how many are not? I think that's going to be what it ends up coming down to. And right now, Q, the week's not over and the Patriots are playing right now. So this number might change by the time I record tomorrow's episode of the show. But right now, in terms of AFC North teams and their schedule that are competing for the division, the Ravens currently have the 6th hardest remaining schedule in the NFL. Meanwhile, the Steelers are at number 23 hardest, and the Bengals are all the way down at number 27. So, you have a lot of good teams. And again, if they do start to go on a little run here, if they can do that, be a nice little tune-up for the postseason where you're playing these elite teams and getting the job done. But you have to get there and beat those teams first. In the AFC, though, it's just so weird because I don't think there's a single, over the years we've seen the Ravens. Oh, they're the top of the AFC this year. There's no doubt. Or, the Chiefs or the Bills or one of those teams, right? But in the AFC this year, Q, I don't know if there's a team that I look at and I say, that's the team that's going to win the AFC. There's probably 10 teams or so that could be in the conversation for that because it all in all right now is so up in the air, and the Ravens are included in that conversation.
Oh, yeah. It really is such a wild final stretch of games, and it's exciting, I think, from a fan base or global NFL fan base picture. Certainly somebody's going to be disappointed. Somebody's going to be, frustrated and, feel like the season was right there for the taking and unfortunately wasn't able to be taken. I think that's where, again, when you look at the bigger picture of goodness, for the Ravens, what do you want to do? You control your own destiny as of now, but what do you want to do? That's going to be the long telltale sign. Can you win games on the road? Can you be consistent enough and play well at home? And once you get into the dance, are you just a one and done type of a team, or you truly feel like you have what it takes to at least get to the divisional round? I think that's what's going to really be, your wild card team. And the divisional round, you're probably going to be playing on the road. Man, I don't know. There's so much football left to play, AFC wise, and all the teams. The Colts, they haven't figured it out. The Jaguars, they have not figured it out, yet they're both in the mix. Goodness gracious, if you look at the way in which, again, Buffalo, is Buffalo for real, or they're going to have a hiccup falling out moment, or you're looking at, the darlings, non-Tom Brady Patriots, are they going to be the team that's going to be making noise? I think the Chargers, the way the Broncos are playing, the Chiefs are like, what about us? We've been 9 times to the AFC Championship game, 9 times. That's just standard operating procedure for them. We're talking about hopefully the Ravens will make the wild card and hopefully, kind of advance out. Nah, they just like, nah, here's what we do. We don't just advance. We advance all the way to the top game. What up? Then we about representation in the big dance. That's how we do. Woo!
Yeah.
Lots of football, lots of questions to be answered in the coming weeks.
Lots of them. And I think for the Ravens, again, your season is on the line here this week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Everything's just too complicated if they lose this game. Can you get into the postseason at 10-7? That was the number I had for the Ravens. But if you lose this Pittsburgh game, you have to go on a heck of a run. So I think that for the Ravens, they wrap up their 3-game homestand here against the Steelers. They'll play 3 of their final 4 games on the road. So we're going to see. This is a really intriguing stretch the Ravens are going to have to go through right now. But that's all we have on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show. Appreciate everybody for tuning in here on this Monday edition. We'll be back here on the Squad Show on Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern Time. But, of course, I'll be back here tomorrow doing the regular show, Locked On Ravens, tomorrow 6 a.m. Eastern Time. So be sure to stay tuned for everything we have here on Locked On Ravens. And hit the like and subscribe button in video form. Follow along and subscribe in audio form. And see you right back here soon on the Locked On Ravens Squad Show.